The next mission starts with us seeing the Chief for the first time in the game, piloting a Pelican as he stares at his helmet, and the place where Cortana would be if she were still alive. It's very clear here that the Chief is still in mourning over the death of Cortana, and all we need to see that is the Chief's body language, not a word spoken, and a nostalgia music number to set the scene. This is a good way to show how Chief is emotionally dealing with her loss, and really displays to me part of what was left for Chief to progress as a character from Halo 4. Do they stay with that? No. But let's not rage on that just yet. We then cut to Chief's fire team, and it is the legendary Blue Team, made up of Fred 104, Linda 58, and Kelly 87. These are the last living members of the Spartan 2 program, and this is our first time seeing them on screen since Forward Unto Dawn, and the first time ever in a Halo game. No, the Fall of Reach movie doesn't count. For those who read the books like me, seeing these characters in a major role for the first time since Ghost of Onyx was a sign things would be great for this story. But as Chief hasn't been with Blue Team ever since the in-between period from First Strike and Halo 2. And now they are with Chief as he is dealing with an emotional crisis none of them have really gone through before since they were kids. The storytelling potential here is massive in scope, and with a lot of care and great writing, this story could have been the greatest Halo story since Halo 2. Though I will point out something many other people have said about Blue Team being in this game. Why are they here? I mean, it makes sense for them to be with Chief after Halo 4, but why don't we have their reunion on screen? I know in the comics they get reunited, but we don't get to see that bit, and as per usual with the other crucial elements of the story, we don't get to see much of it. It's a minor detail, but Blue Team has been with Chief for virtually his whole life. I think considering the circumstances, we should have had a bit more on offer for them to do, as well as more scenes. Or you could have it that Blue Team is reunited with Chief in this game at the beginning in a different cutscene. But no, we need the plot to progress instead of building / revealing more of the Chief's character and building those of Blue Team's. Fred is showing concern about the Chief's condition, noting that he hadn't seen the Chief push himself this hard since their training days in the Spartan 2 program. Kelly says that he's fine, but Fred isn't convinced, as Chief has done quite a few missions in a row with no real time for rest. The concern is really appreciated from a story element. They haven't been with the Chief for a while, and seeing them talk about the Chief's emotional state helps bridge the connection they have to him on screen. Even though this opening scene has the same problem as Osiris has, we are given much more substance here to use on screen. We then cut to see the Chief putting back on his helmet as the Pelican is getting closer to its destination, a derelict space station called Argent Moon. Blue Team is here to secure it, as it has been missing nearly Event Horizon style, and was found by Jackal pirates that sold it to Julian Dama's military. After arriving, Chief tells Infinity that they have located the moon, and Infinity Ops gives simple instructions. Eliminate all hostiles and secure the station. Finally, something simple that was actually portrayed as being extremely simple. Before Chief prepares to go full BFG division, he groups up with Blue Team to gear up. Fred asks him if he's good, with Chief nodding his head in confirmation, then they jump out of their Pelican into space. Using their jump jets to maneuver around a few asteroids, they shoot through and enter a window where a few elites are standing, break in, and using their mag boots aren't sucked out by the pressure of space, as the elites try desperately to stay in but to no avail, with the scene cutting to black as Blue Team stands still as the shutter closes behind them. Now, some have criticized this scene for being kinda dumb, but it's a lot better than people give it credit for. For one, jumping into this barely guarded section of the station instead of just going in guns blazing, it keeps the Covenant off their back. 2, it's nowhere near as much over the top as Osiris' opening, as the choreography is actually pretty good, despite nothing really happening. And the elites in this situation act like any elite would when faced with certain death, try to take someone with them. And 3, the score really kicks in to amplify it with a little nostalgia track as we finally see Blue Team in action.
Blue Team, fall out.
The Envoy are resisting. Throw the Envoy out the airlock.
To start the first Chief mission, we have an excellent and meaningful start. So how will the game fuck this up? For most of the mission, just like the last one, there isn't much happening in the gameplay to progress the story, though that is only for about the first half of the mission. I will talk a little bit about the station though. I really love the atmosphere of a decaying lost space station. The dark corridors, the corpses, the debris, and the left behind logs of the ship's AI makes for an interesting story. I won't spoil it, and this is honestly one of the things I will point to it as being cool in Halo 5's campaign. I'm not kidding about that Event Horizon comparison, by the way. It's really got that vibe. From the dead crew, the rotten air, and the air of mystery and tension, this feels more like something we would actually see from Halo. And all of the pieces are here for an excellent story. Too bad it's just for a side mission and not a major story element. As Chief and Blue Team progresses through the station, they encounter increasing resistance from the Covenant as they try to secure it. And for what it's worth, the level is designed pretty well, with a few linear sections just opposed to large arenas of combat. The station feels expansive, and has quite a few ways to move around the level. I really like this level all the way through from a gameplay perspective. But we gotta talk about something that happens in the middle of this level. And this something helps set the stage for the rest of the game to unfold. After clearing out a large force of Covenant, Blue Team is crossing a bridge and is ambushed by a hunter bursting through a wall, causing the bridge to collapse. Moving fast, it slams down in the middle of the bridge in front of the Chief, causing him to fall down into a chasm and getting knocked out, presumably. You don't see him hitting the ground or anything, so I have no idea what happens when the Chief comes to a moment later. And just by looking around, you can tell there's something in Chief's head, as the metal interior of the space station is replaced with rock from a cave. Chief tries to call for Blue Team, but gets no response from them. But he does get a response in the form of a whisper calling out his rank. And if you have subtitles on, this is the point where the worst is confirmed. Cortana is alive. And not only is she alive, she is calling out to John.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that, Private Pie?
Immediately, I have some problems. For one, if Cortana's been alive this whole time, why didn't she immediately go to find John like we all know she would? The bond between Chief and Cortana was a major beat to the story of Halos 3 and 4. So why the hell wouldn't she try to find him? Second, if she couldn't get to John before now, where the fuck has she been? The Didact ship was destroyed by the Chief's nuke, and she used all of her remaining power to save Chief from the destruction of it. Unless she teleported suddenly using Forerunner tech, how the hell did she leave? Why would she leave? Third, how is Cortana sending psychic brainwave things to the Chief to contact him? I'm not sure how the hell that works. I've never heard of anything telepathic for Forerunners in the lore, and I've read some of the Forerunner books by Greg Bear. And fourth, just what in God's name is going on? Why resurrect Cortana at all? You do realize you could have done what the last game said could happen and give Chief another Cortana model and have something interesting around that aspect of the game? You know, Chief is consoling with the new Cortana model to try to get over the grief of the original Cortana's death, and then have some scenes with Halsey trying to get him help. But no, you brought the actual Cortana back to life. For what fucking reason? Well, here it is. Chief, after walking through the cave for a moment, comes to an opening, where black-faced Cortana is standing on the side of the cliff. I'm not kidding, though. Like, I know what the effect they're trying to go for. It's like, oh, you can't really see Cortana because we don't know what she looks like right now. And it's going to be kind of a surprise later on, but seriously, she's just all black, so it's like Cortana's in blackface. She calls to him, saying the domain is open, Meridian is next, and that the reclamation is going to begin soon. Okay, so now we also get confirmation that Cortana is at least somewhat responsible for the colonies disappearing. But what the fuck is the reclamation? That's something that's never been brought up by anything Forerunner in the whole series, even the Librarian. The Librarian hasn't even mentioned that yet. And what does she mean by the domain being open? I know the Forerunner domain is a super important collective intelligence for the Forerunners, but we haven't had access to it before, for obvious reasons. Why is this game not showing or telling us critical fucking information when we need it? At this point in the game, we've had all the crucial story elements either get not built up properly and or dropped in our faces. What the hell, Brian Reed? Also, where the hell's Librarian anyway? If this is something so important, you think she would be right here with us just like she was on Requiem with the Didact. I know it was just a fragment of her mind, but you tell me she didn't leave anything for contingency plans for the Chief, considering she's the one, you know, technically who created the Chief? Ugh. Anyway, a Guardian comes out from the ground and it causes Chief to nearly fall over in exhaustion, and this brings him out of the fever dream, vision, telepathic communication thing Cortana had him in, and Blue Team is trying to help up John. Okay, so why is Chief not on the ground like he should be? Didn't he just fall from a bridge and was, like, not conscious for 3 minutes? Why is he just leaning over and not on his back? You expect me to believe he was in a sitting position for that long? Or in a crouched position for that long? Or was he actually conscious and lost in a daydream-like trance? Oh god, the tism is really starting to pick up, and this is only mission 2 of 15. Oh, fuck. Oh. Chief finally gets up after a few seconds and says, "She's on Meridian." Kelly asks who the fuck is there, and Chief responds with Cortana as the scene fades to black again. Brian, can you stop fading to black so much? This is not The Thing or an old western, this is fucking Halo. Stop acting like you're some great artist and video director, because you're not. I'm not saying don't have fades, because I rather like fades to black, but you should only use it sparingly and for pivotal moments. We're not even a quarter of the way into the game yet, and we've gotten fades from all but 2 cutscenes. But all of that pales in comparison to the big fucking problem here. Holy fuck, what the hell are you doing with Cortana? It looks like, at this point, they're trying to turn her into the second coming of the Librarian, but they haven't built that up properly whatsoever. Not only that, Cortana's story was completed in Halo 4. Using necromancy to bring Cortana back without any decent explanation in this short distance from the beginning of the game, and without any good build-up, is not only extremely dumb, but it's really disrespectful for the character. Reminds me of how Luke and TLJ got treated, and how in this first scene we get of him in 30 years is used for slapstick humor and for the sake of the plot instead of the respect that the character deserves. Fuck off, Ryan Reed. Blue Team are left wondering how the hell Cortana is alive, but like what the Chief would do in this situation, he puts the current mission first. Something that makes sense. They continue on fighting through dark corridors against suicide grunts, hunters, and invisible elites. As they progress, they see the Covenant fleet has arrived to the station to secure it. Left with insurmountable odds and no choice, Chief gives the order to scuttle the station. The rest of the mission is just Blue Team going around blowing things up in order to make sure the station goes into full meltdown. After doing so, they try to evac, but their Pelican is destroyed by the Covenant, so they have to go get a Prowler from one of the launch bays in order to escape the blast fast enough, as the Banshees they are in can't outrun the explosion, and they would also be exposed to the vacuum of space with limited air supply in their suits, so it would be kind of dumb to stick with that anyway. After holding out against waves of Covenant, the Prowler is primed to go. As Chief and Blue Team prepare to board, Chief informs Infinity Comms that the station has been scuttled and that he's reassigning Blue Team to go to Meridian, thanks to that communication, if you can call it that, from Cortana, and is going to find her. Only for Infinity Comms to, strangely enough, respond with something that is rather puzzling on someone's first playthrough. Infinity responds that another team is being prepped to deal with her. Language that isn't very reassuring, and is ordered to return to Infinity. John disregards this order, as he and most others playing would respond the same way. Blue Team then gives Chief support, further showing their bond to each other, and they fly away from the exploding station in the cold of space. Okay, I have so many questions. So many questions. First off, does Chief, even as the most respected soldier in history, even have the authority to just reassign his team like that in the field? I know he could probably pick and choose assignments, but he would still need to get the go-ahead from Lasky and the top brass. Second, this confirms that Halsey and Lasky were discussing Cortana, so once again, if Cortana's up to something, why not just tell Chief? Alright, why not have something for him to look through? He has as much as right to know as anyone in the goddamn galaxy. Just dismissing him like that when he just found out his best friend is potentially still alive is of course going to lead the Chief to disobey orders. And since Halsey in literally the next cutscene is like, John mustn't speak to her, this should have been your biggest priority, to make sure the chief doesn't stray away. And third, while I appreciate that the blue team is going with him to show how strong their bond is, why are we having blue team immediately go with Chief? Chief cares for his comrades enough that he would, in this situation, not want to put them in danger. He doesn't want them to get court-martialed and anything like that for disobeying orders. These are his people. These are the last of his kind. He doesn't want to put them in danger. This is something for him to do specifically alone. And not only that, all we have for confirmation that Cortana was alive to begin with was that bullshit communication thing, and Chief barely said anything about it after the fact. So there isn't much information for them to go on. Considering the situation, wouldn't be plausible for them to think maybe Chief was hallucinating, or that something else was up. Even after all they've been through, if I were in that situation, I'd be really concerned. And there is a way to fix this, actually showing us something. But I have a different method. Properly building things up. For something that's supposed to be a pivotal moment to kick the story in gear, I think it needs all the time that's afforded to. So I'll show you what I would have done in this situation with Blue Team. You have Chief talking with Blue Team as they escape Argent Moon. Chief isn't sure about what he exactly saw, but he's convinced that Cortana is alive. Blue Team isn't sure how to respond, but they convince him not to travel to Meridian immediately and return to the Infinity with the news. As they get back, he immediately goes to find Lasky, who's in the middle of talking with Halsey. Chief and Halsey have a bittersweet reunion, since the last time they were together, Halsey abandoned him, Cortana, and the survivors of Reach and Halo to find Onyx, and she apologizes for the death of Cortana. Chief explains to them his vision and thinks that Cortana is alive and that they have to go to Meridian. As he processes the information Halsey gave him in Chief's testimony, Lasky agrees and is ready to let Chief take Blue Team there, but is not only met with resistance from the UNSC brass, but Halsey herself. Halsey explains how Cortana is potentially dangerous and that they can't risk Chief going out there. They order the Chief to stay grounded on Infinity and prep Osiris to deal with her, further signifying that they don't want Cortana around. Chief goes to the Blue Team and tells them of their situation, and that he doesn't know why he's getting pushback from everyone. They aren't sure how to respond, but after a little while, Chief decides to go off on his own and take the Prowler and go to Meridian. Halsey freaks out that Chief left, and the UNSC declare Chief AWOL. Fred and the rest of Blue Team, fearing for Chief's safety, decide to go after him, also going AWOL. So, with all of them gone, Lasky has no choice but to give Osiris a secondary objective: bring in the Chief and Blue Team, thus starting the game of cat and mouse between Locke and John. Now, this outline isn't perfect, but it's a fuck ton better than anything we have for the story thus far in the game. Something was very wrong with how information is presented to the player so far in this game, and with such little build-up and meaningful dialogue, I'm just sitting here at this point in the game wondering just what the fuck is going on here. There's so much you can do to make this feel so much more impactful to the players. The Chief is not only disobeying orders, he's going to try and bring back Cortana despite her being potentially dangerous. This is something you need all the time in the world for, to not only build up, but you need to make sure it is done right. And this game has failed at doing both. That's pitiful. The next cutscene starts then with Halsey storming into the CIC with Palmer to tell Lasky once again she warned them about what was going on. She puts forth that Cortana is not viable as a resource and that by accessing the domain, she is able to do so much damage to the galaxy. Roland, which is Infinity's AI for those of you who don't know, expresses shock that Cortana is alive, which is weird to me. Did the two of you even meet in Halo 4? I was under the impression in Spartan Ops that Roland wasn't even there, so why is he acting like he just found out a long-lost friend was alive? But whatever. Lasky tells Halsey that Chief believes Cortana contacted him and has gone to search for her, which Lasky responds with dismay that they should see each other, and chastising Lasky for letting him go. Palmer responds with saying no one lets the Chief do anything, and that he does what he wants, which is absolutely not true, especially if you read the books. I mean, I know he was able to technically outrank a Vice Admiral one time, but that was due to the situation they were in during First Strike. In the Flood, the Chief was still subordinate to the other officers on Halo and Captain Keyes. And being a Spartan, Chief was always sent to where the action was heaviest. He isn't Duke Nukem, who can literally do whatever the fuck he wants. He's the Master Chief Petty Officer of the United Nations Space Command. Come on, why can't you even get that right, game? Anyway, Lasky says Chief has been declared AWOL, and Halsey, somewhat rightly, says Chief may not be able to emotionally deal with her as a threat. And Roland, since he's been ignored by everyone thus far, burst out yelling if anyone's going to answer him about what's going on with this shit. Then he starts ranting at Halsey about throwing Cortana under the bus because she didn't die during randomancy, and thinks that they have something against her for no reason. But before we can actually get to that answer, the scene fades to black and ends again. Motherfucker, can you stop the gore and fades to black before we get the information we need? This is really pissing me off. Ugh. Stop that. This scene is extremely infuriating. I refuse to believe that Lasky, the guy who risked his rank to give the Chief a Pelican in the last fucking game when the Infinity was leaving Requiem, and was saved by the Chief many years ago as a cadet at Corbulo, would just disregard him the moment he goes AWOL. Like, seriously, he's showing no emotion about Chief leaving. He knows damn well what the Chief is going through right now, and instead of trying to help him out, nope, he's a threat now because he wants that sweet Cortana pussy. Which is something all of us should want. Cortana's best girl. Also, Roland is kind of annoying, but I get what they were trying to do with him, to stand up for one of his own kind when Cortana is accused of something he doesn't even know what happened yet, which is also a big plot hole because they got that info from Halsey that Cortana's up to something, is at least partly responsible for colonies disappearing, and since he's the shipboard AI, you'd think you know about this shit well before now. Don't you think? Don't you think? It's just, I get what they were trying to do though. It's just that the whole scene is just badly rushed. This is some of our main characters reacting to the Chief disobeying orders and being wanted for going AWOL. And it's getting cut short again. I know why it's happening. It's to hide the stupid ass twist later in the game. I'm not going over it yet, but this has the same problem TFA and The Rise of Skywalker did. They're less concerned about actually building up the story just to show off the neat visuals and game mechanics and graphics. It's all to dazzle the audience. But guess what? The context for the visual is fucking dog shit, then loses all meaning and becomes trash. Just ask TLJ how that worked out with the hyperspace ramming scene. Now we have the story falling into place right now, and it's hemorrhaging. There's so many holes that not even Jan Valentine could fuck them all. The exposition is done in the most bare-bones way imaginable, and even gets worse than that, and the story is moving way too fast for its own good. Now before my brains explode due to all the tism, let's move on to the next 3 Osiris missions. Yes, 3 missions without the Chief as a playable character. Whoopee. I totally hope something good can come out of this.
I don't know if it's too soon to ask you for a favor, but we're gonna run out of breathing room here real quick. I don't suppose you're any good at clearing LZs.
On occasion. I'll send out an all clear once the area is secured.
The Chief believes she contacted him.
No, John must not speak to her.
He's gone in search of her.
You let him go?
How is it
Nobody lets the Chief do anything. He does what he wants.
Until 0631 this morning, when he was declared absent without leave.
This isn't about the Master.